with family and business, because you can't let your feelings for your family affect the way you'd want to do business.
Yeah, that's so true. I think when it comes to your family, it can be kind of harder to set boundaries, but just because people are so emotionally driven around their families. But one thing that, Matt kind of said was that you have to learn how to put boundaries from the beginning. It doesn't matter, if they're your mom, if they're your dad, if they're your brother, your sister, you have to learn how to put boundaries, because if you don't put boundaries with your family, eventually it's going to start spilling over into a lot of areas in your life. Or maybe you're already doing it and you just don't pay attention. But I know for me, a lot of my struggles with setting boundaries with my family was because I didn't know how to set boundaries within myself or just in general at all. So that's really where it was stemming from. So that's really something I had to learn with navigating business and life, where I think we talked about it on another call, where, time blocking your day is going to help you. For example, I have a big family, and so if I let my family call me whenever they wanted to, I would be on the phone for about 3 hours a day.
All day.
Every day. And so that was a huge boundary that I had to set, where, you can only call me during these times, or like if it's an emergency, if we need to talk, like, hey, we can talk, but you got max 15, 20 minutes. And again, everybody's boundaries look different, but you just have to learn and find what works for you. Because that's really going to help you, again, just be super clear about what is it that you need in that season, and how can other people make sure that they're respecting your boundaries without you guys always getting into conflict. Because I think that, especially with family, this is just something I noticed coming from a Hispanic family, Latina, but everything always turns into a conflict. And so that's something that I've had to teach even my family along the way. This does not mean that I think you're a bad person, or this doesn't mean that I have something against you, or, that you did something to hurt me. It just means that these are my boundaries and you have to respect them at this moment. And I think that, that's a whole conversation in itself, but you have to sometimes learn how to do that with your family, or just have that conversation with them, like, hey, this doesn't mean that, I have something against you. It just means that in this season, I have to learn how to prioritize my time in this way.
Yeah, and even if you explain it, you still can't expect people to understand. You can assume, but that's only going to get you so far when you're expecting people to really get why you blocking their phone calls, or why you not texting them back, or why you not responding back to their emails, or why you not going to that family gathering on Saturday, or why you didn't go to that birthday party on Sunday. It's certain things. Again, we separating the business from the family, but also trying to bring it together. Is people got to understand when we need our own time to get stuff done for our business, it might not always be the best time that it is during the family.
Yeah. And I wanted to add off of that. I think that the reason why a lot of people people please, and this is just a common thing that I've noticed, is that nobody wants to hurt each other's feelings. Everybody wants to kind of walk on eggshells and make sure that they're just not hurting anybody else. And sometimes no response is a response. Sometimes no response is your boundary. So sometimes you don't know anybody an explanation. Sometimes maybe you just need to deal with stuff, and it means that you don't communicate anything to anybody, and that's just your boundary, and that's it. And I think that, with age or just with time, you kind of learn to see what works for you. Because again, there's just sometimes where, like Matt said, I don't have the time to explain this to a family member. I don't have the time to explain this to somebody, because then they're going to come up with 20 other questions. They're going to come up with 20 other topics that they're going to try to drive you, or they're going to try to convince you, or they're going to try to question, why. And sometimes you just don't need to explain yourself.
Yeah, and that time that they answering all those questions, or you answering them, you could be doing something for your business.
Yeah. And the reason I brought up people pleasing is because I think that when you don't do something that somebody else wants, you automatically think oh, you're a bad person, or you're hurting somebody else. And you almost have to rewire your brain and unlearn that, because again, this is just a common thing that I've found with a lot of people, not just, 2 or 3, but a lot of people always say their people pleasing tendencies comes because they don't want to hurt anybody, or they don't want to hurt people's feelings, or the way that they're perceived in other people's minds. And that was something that I had to grow out of, is that even though I never really cared about people's opinions, I did care a little bit about how I was perceived in their mind. And that was something that I had to unlearn, because I'm why do I care about how they perceive me when we don't even have the same goals, or when we don't even
share the same
have the same vision in this season.
Yeah.
And so that was something that I had to learn. everybody's journey is different, everybody's chapter is different, and whatever it looks like to you, that's it. You know, it's your life. At the end of the day, you can do whatever you want in your life. You can make your own rules to your life because you only get one life. So just keep that in mind, is that, you know, for example, some people don't celebrate holidays. Like, that's a huge thing with people from like different religious backgrounds. But again, sometimes we forget because we're in our own little world, that we think that everybody has to do things the way that we do. And then that's just not how life works. But
yeah. If you do happen to have a family member that's business oriented and you trust them, that's probably your best business partner. Is to have family, because it's super easy to be integrated within that dynamic in that relationship, because one, you already trust that person, and then two, that person understands you from before the business. They knew you before you started the business, so that person probably understands you better, and that's going to be a better business partner than somebody that you just randomly met. Or sometimes it isn't, but in a positive way, in the best case scenario, definitely doing family with business and family is really good. Like, the one thing I always look at, the prime example, is the Kardashians. Like, I love, from an outside looking in, I don't know what's going on within their business. I don't know the type of conversations but they have, but I just know I love seeing that family dynamic, and they all being proud business owners and the stuff that they're accomplishing within their family.
yeah, and I just want to build off of that. You also have to trust the person. You have to know that they are gonna have the same morals and values as you. So if you have family members that obviously align with you in that way and you trust them completely, then I would say go for it. But you also want to be careful with family, because sometimes there can be blurred lines, or you just assume that something is one way, or they assume that something is another way. And when it comes to money, for some reason, money just breaks relationships. I've seen it firsthand with family members, and you know, money is a touchy subject. So one thing that I learned when I was younger, and I just want to mention it, is, I don't know where I heard this. I think I got this from my dad, but it was like, never lend money if you don't expect to never get it back, if that makes sense. Like, never lend out money if you're always going to be like waiting to get it back.
If you're expecting to get it back, don't lend it out.
Because you're not. And luckily, like, I don't want to say luckily, but I've had really good just friends and family around me that whenever we lend money from each other, I always get it back. I never expect to get it back, but I always get it back because of the trust that I have in these friends and you know, family. My cousin's a big example of that. Like, you know, but I bring that up because when it comes to money, money is a touchy subject. So you just want to make sure that you fully trust the person. And like Matt said, I think it's like a blessing when you have family that are entrepreneurs, because they get it and they understand the power of investing. And that's why I say money is a touchy subject, because if your family or people around you that are entrepreneurship don't understand the power of investing and how money is a tool and resource, that's really, really where you're just going to start butting heads. But yeah, I definitely think it's a blessing to be able to do business with your family, because I think that just coming from an entrepreneur standpoint, it is really hard, like you said, sometimes trying to explain things to your family that work a 9-to-5 or that kind of just clock in and clock out, and they don't understand how entrepreneurship is so much more than that. You have to, you know, do your own expenses, you have to do your own taxes, you have to do your own marketing, you have to do your own videography, you have to do your own branding. Like, there's so many components to a business that people don't understand why you're always working on your business. But yeah, I guess with that, we wanted to talk about like what are some strategies for finding balance, and I kind of already mentioned one, but it was time blocking your day. Yeah,
that's the biggest thing I really got, is planning and time blocking. Like,
Matt, I need your help growing my social media audience.
all right, guys, if you need help growing your social media audience, make sure you text 602-390-7002. Once again, it's 602-390-7002. Doing family trips, doing date
like
nights.
scheduling all that. Yeah,
Like, that's super duper important. At least having the idea or the concept out in the air between you and your family on stuff that y'all want to do. Like I said, that way when you strategize everything, you're still able to get all the things that you want to get done accomplished. Like, you might be 50% on the business and you might be doing 30% with your main family and the other, what am I missing? 20%, you doing something, you doing sports and athletic time. Like, I'm pretty sure 100% of my day, 10%, 100% of my week or month, 10% is in my fitness. So the other 90%, I just got to split it up, but I got to make sure I keep it consistent with spending time with family and working on business.
Yeah, and that's so important because, like I said, I think that sometimes we can become one-dimensional or kind of just focus on one area in our life. And, you know, you kind of tend to notice what are those buckets for you. Like I said, for me, a huge bucket that I spend a majority of my time in was my education and my career, because obviously that was like my way out of poverty. Like, you know, for me, it was almost stressed every single day in my household, you know, go get an education, go get this, because that's going to get you out of poverty, which is not always the case. But again, you usually have like a big bucket that you're spending a lot of time and energy on. So figure out what that is for you. And then from there, figure out, you know, is it a healthy work balance? Is it a healthy balance that you enjoy? If not, like where are other areas that you can spend more time into? And I'm so glad that Matt mentioned that, because even like those family trips or those family date nights, if you don't schedule them, they will never happen. And so that's one thing that I'm so glad that he does, is that he always, you know, caves out or just blocks out time, like every quarter, every week, every month. And he's like, this is family time, this is this. And, you know, that's a really good tip. But and with that, yeah, what are some generational wealth and business legacy tips that you would give somebody?
Education on financial literacy. I think that's the biggest thing that I've ran across, because growing up, money was not a topic of conversation. I just knew, like, when I was growing up, I was the oldest out of 5 kids, so I was doing all the store runs when my mom couldn't. So I knew how much was on the EBT card. Like, I knew how much to spend. I knew how much groceries I can get. So in a sense, I was kind of like forced into like budgeting and stuff like that. Like, I knew I was in charge of getting snacks for the kids, and I knew I had this much money, and I was only able to get this amount of shit back. So when I learned my financial literacy through the bank, I learned how people kept their money and grew their money. So education is the #1 thing for me.
That's a really good tip. Yeah, I was gonna say for me, it would be education through financial literacy. I definitely think that's the #1 thing that I wish I would have learned more when I was younger. And then 2 is just learning new skills, because I feel like nobody ever really talks about that, or nobody ever really.
Yeah, but money making skills, not just any skill.
Yes, that is so important.
Because you can learn
That is
you
so,
can learn
so
so
important.
many different skills.
That
Unfortunately,
is so important. Definitely learn high earning paying skills.
Yeah.
High earning paying skills, because that was one thing that I wish I would have learned. And, you know.
Well, you did learn.
Well, I don't want to say luckily, because I worked my ass off, but luckily I feel like I did end up in a high paying skill, which is marketing, because not a lot of people understand and grasp that concept. So whatever that looks like for you, research, you know, high paying skills, and then learn a couple of those. For example, Matt, you know, you kind of you did go to college for graphic design, but even then there was a lot of things that you were always teaching yourself. So it just goes to show, like, when you really want to learn something, you find a way, whether you go to college, whether you look up on YouTube, whether you read books. You know, education is your best friend. So whether that be learning financial literacy tips, or whether that be learning a high paying skill, education for me has really, really been the way out. Like, even in my younger days, or even like in college, like I really feel like just educating myself has helped me in so many ways that paid me back. But
yeah, no, back to your point, that's another thing that I would do, because I have high paying skills. I have multiple sets of skills that land me high paying jobs. So that is super duper important. And not only that, that's something you can teach other people. Like being a coach, like that's
learning how to diversify your streams of income.
That's another one up there. There's at least 5 ones that you should absolutely take on. So.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that, because whenever you learn one skill, you can always multiply that into 5 or 10, like Matt said. So, But hot topic of the week was, what do you guys do to balance starting, growing a business and life? So someone asked, hey
Same
guys,
thing we already said.
I work with service business clients and help them to grow through marketing. What I do isn't important for this question though, so enough about that. I am curious about how folks here are balancing work and life as they grow their business. Work can be a grind, but overall I enjoy the challenge and how much I am working.